Trading in Magic the Gathering has changed considerably over the last 25 years, going from subjective to objective. Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles. I was sitting down today preparing a sale, got some cards I am getting rid of, and it just dawned on me the huge difference. I was sitting there thinking about how much trading had morphed over the years. I was also thinking just how crazy life is, because I can see, I don't know, you can see right there on the camera, but last night, washing my face, I don't know how, washing my face, I somehow injured my nose. So I'm washing my face and I look down and there's blood. Have you ever been washing your face and you look down and there's blood on your hands? It shouldn't be there, and it's like, what is going on? So yeah, that's my life. I don't know what's going. Maybe I'm dying. I got some weird random disease where wash your face, you're gonna bleed. Apparently maybe I'm allergic to water. I don't know what the deal is. But anyways, I'm getting sidetracked from the trading issue. Let's get back to it. So I've been a part of Magic for almost the full 25 years that it has been around. And in terms of the changes in trading, I can safely say that I can speak for the small portion of Magic before I started. I started in 1994. Magic was created in 1993. There were only a few sets printed before I started. Just the original Alpha, Beta, Unlimited sets, and some of those weren't even available in Canada, because the Alpha and Beta, I believe you couldn't even get outside of a very, very small part of the States. And then there was Unlimited, which had a short print run as well. So I was already there when Revised started. I was there when the third Magic expansion was printed, when like Legends came out. So I've been around forever, and there's no way that trading was any different before that point as to when I started, because it took years and years for the change to happen. The change is very gradual, to the point with a lot of change, you don't notice it unless you sit back and really reflect on it. And since I have that insane amount of experience, at the very, very beginning, guys, we would just go pick up starter decks and booster packs. You would open them up and you'd be like, oh, hey, look at these great cards. There were no rarity symbols. You had to figure out which ones were the rares. You had to figure out where they showed up in the packs. And basically, either you had to memorize all the different rarities or just kind of guess. It took a long time to figure out what was rare, what wasn't rare. There was no internet to go on. You couldn't go and look for lists of cards. None of that existed. You couldn't find spoilers before sets were coming out. You couldn't find lists of cards that existed. The entire experience was opening packs, finding what you wanted out of those packs, and then going to other people and seeing what craziness they had opened from packs and trading with them. Like, selling cards was almost not even happening. Stores would sell some singles, yes, but sales between players was virtually unheard of. It was all done through trading, right? And there was no, you know how now you look up prices of cards and everything like that? None of that existed back then. There was no looking up prices for trading. People just traded on what they felt like trading. Like, for example, I remember days where I would be talking to somebody and they had like 3 Vesuvan doppelgangers I wanted. And I'm like, well, what do you like? I want Vesuvan doppelgangers. What are you looking for? And they say, I'm looking for Inferno, and I didn't have any Infernos, but there was a guy down at the other end of like way down at the other end of the store, who happened to have the Infernos, and I was like, hey, like, I want these Infernos, what do you want? And he's got like 3 Infernos, so I was like, well, would you take a doppelganger for 3 Infernos? And the guy's like, yeah, sure. And then the other guy was like, he had the 3 doppelgangers, so I said, would you take an Inferno for 3 doppelgangers? And he said, sure. So then I got like some doppelgangers Infernos out of the deal. Like, it was a very sort of whatever everybody wanted kind of deal. There wasn't a lot of, this card is worth X. I mean, there were a few cards that were like big and chase worthy, but on the whole, I mean, my first Black Lotus, I traded 2 Rock Hydras and 2 Rock of Courageous, which are some really wonky red rares. And I mean, it's not like Black Lotus wasn't like Black Lotus was in print then and people didn't know what it was. Like, Black Lotus at that point, I believe, was about a $50 card, and from the pricing that you could find them in the actual store. And then the Rock Hides and Rockers, like, I don't even think they had prices on them, really. Like, a lot of singles didn't even have prices. You couldn't get every card. There was no go online and order, whatever. So it was just kind of make deals about however you feel about the cards. It was very, very subjective from person to person. And in that situation I just outlined for you, people didn't come back later and be like, oh, I'm pissed off that I didn't get those doppelgangers or those Infernos and you took advantage of me. Nobody cared. It was all just, hey, that's cool, man. You wanted to get these cards and you wanted these cards. It's all just trading. Like, there was no real, oh my God, I got, like, without money being involved and those concepts attached to it, there wasn't really the feeling of getting ripped off. And even without those prices, you still had like tiers of cards. Like, people were like, okay, Mahamodi Djinn is a great creature, but Shivan Dragon is higher than that, and Royal Assassin is higher than that, and that was all agreed upon. And interesting cards like Lord of the Pit actually had value. People wanted to play with that gigantic piece of garbage. I mean, you see it now in Iconic Masters, and yeah, it's garbage. Back in the day, it was more of a, like, gut feelings. You know how noobs feel about, like, gut cards? You look, that's a 50-cent rare, but a noob would get excited about it. The values of cards were more guided by that. And so trading was more based in that realm. And even when, like, some sort of rough price guiding would come along in terms of Scry magazine, those would come out, it was either once a month or once every 3 months. Some absurdly long period of time. I mean, imagine now, guys, if to look up the prices, they were static and wouldn't change for a month. And those first prices wouldn't even come out for a month, right? I remember when, like, Grim Monolith first came out and people were starting to use it instead of Jester's Cap or thinking about it. Not really, I can't say people because it wasn't this big internet thing. But anyways, I really liked Graining Totem. I thought it was a great card. So I picked up a bunch. And then they started trading for 2 dual lands apiece because the demand for them was there. So it was that kind of trading, and it would take like a month before the prices would come out in a magazine, and people were like, oh, okay, look at these. Like, most people didn't even use the price guides. It took a long time before the information on pricing became so readily available that it influenced how people traded. I remember there was a guy who would come to tournaments. He would play in drafts, right? And he would get all these cards in draft, and he would build his decks, and he would only buy singles. But he was the only guy who did that at the store. The only guy. And it blew my mind because I would watch him buy packs and packs and packs and play in draft. And all the cards he would get that he wasn't using, he would just throw aside. And it wasn't like he treasured them. He just wasn't using them. He didn't care about trading. He found it just easier to buy cards. And it was such a foreign concept because for the majority, people would buy a few singles that may be really hard to get, or they'd be like, oh my god, look, they have like this particular card that's hard to find from Legends in the display case. And that's another thing as well. You had local ecosystems for trading. Without having the ability to go online and buy cards and the ability to contact people really outside your local area, it was really difficult to bring in new cards from outside of your area, right? And if cards left your area, that was a big problem. To the point where, like, Legends was extremely hard to get around here, okay? When I started, Legends was available for 1 day. I got to buy 3 booster packs of it, okay? I cracked an Elder Dragon Legend out of that Legends pack that was worth $40 at the time because it was one of the huge, like, handful of chase rares from the set. It's hilarious to think now because, I mean, now like, you can get a Chronicles version for 50 cents and the original version's like $10. But at the time it was $40 when a Mox was 15. So these cards were like crazy hard to get. On top of that, Legends had a specific issue where if you bought a box of Legends, you could only get half the uncommons from the set. There was a collation error where it was literally impossible to get half the uncommons from the set, which made it that much more difficult, right? Because there's only a few boxes that came to our city at most, and then do you even have the uncommons? So there's all this scarcity issues with Legends to the point where there was me and this other guy who we were able to get a bunch of the Legends cards in our area, and we had an agreement between each other that we would literally only exchange them between each other. There was no trading them with anybody else, no selling them, any of that. They were like, I'll trade you this Pixie Queen from Legends on the stipulation that if you are ever letting it go out of your possession, that you come to me and I have the opportunity to get it first. That was the deal, and we would always snap up every, like, hard to get Master of the Hunts. Like, my god, guys, to be able to get a playset of Masters of the Hunt was like a dream of mine for the longest time, and it took so much work. It took years and years to track down 4 copies of this rare from Legends, okay? And it's not the most amazing rare. It was like, it's 4 mana for a 2/2, pay 4 mana, make a 1/1 wolf token that bans with other wolf tokens. And I use Timberwolves to represent the rares. But the point is that was the difficulty that it would take to acquire some of these cards. There was no just going online, grabbing it. There was no equalization of price based on a wide availability, right? You had local tight like card ecospheres, essentially. So you would have to trade within them, exist within them. Values were set within them, not spoken monetary values, just play trade values. So it was very subjective. And as time went on and more information became available, you'd have access to the internet. Now, you wouldn't have access to the internet all the time. Not everybody had smartphones, right? But you would be able to go home, you would be able to look up prices, you would be able to keep your thumb somewhat on the prices because they also were more static at that time. They didn't shift as readily as they do now. So you could see maybe a price holding, you could look a price up online and it could hold for a week or two or more, right? Depending on the circumstances. So you could use that information. You could have looked something up a couple weeks ago. That information is still of use to you. So you can go in somewhat armed with price information. And in that situation, you had trades where that was some of the time of like the biggest sharking going on, where there was people who would take advantage of people who didn't have the knowledge. Nobody has smartphones really, so they can't check. You would have people, if they pulled out their phone and wanted to check, would be like, oh, I don't want to trade with you now, because they're literally there. Like, this was an era of more lopsided, intentionally lopsided trades. There were plenty of lopsided trades in terms of value previously, but that's because the value was so subjective, right? And so the lopsided trades, both parties were fine with them. So really, I mean, technically it's lopsided, but it's a non-issue lopsided kind of trade. Now, through the shift moving to the current era where we have like smartphones, there was this time frame where not everybody had cell phones. I know I didn't carry one around a lot of the time. I relied on having looked stuff up ahead of time and not getting taken advantage of through that. Just kind of being generally armed with a rough range to use for the card, as opposed to like, okay, whatever. So when I would go to like an event in Toronto or something, I would know if I deal, because the people up there would know more. Like they would be like, there's a different community, there's a larger group, there are people there who are there to take advantage of you. I would have people literally saying things to me like, it was absurd. I would have cards in there, I would be like, oh, what's it worth? And they were like, oh, it's your card, I can't tell you what it's worth. And I'm like, oh, you don't know what this card's worth? I guess I can't trade it to you then. And then they would tell you what the price was. And it's like, okay, there you go, thanks. And then it's like, it's just this insane sort of like trying to one-up you by, I have this information I hope you can't get, and I'm literally going to try and monetarily rape you. Like, I encountered this a whole wide number of times with like different setups. There was one guy actually travels around with a suitcase, writes down every single trade that he makes, every single card. When you're done, you got to sit and wait while he writes it all home. Writes it all out, I should say, so we can go home and masturbate about the value difference that he's made. He was an absurd human being. Like, we did a deal where I had a bunch of really nice foils. Hard to get foils, but useless in my area because no demand for them. So I'm trading them for other stuff, non-foil, like fancy, nice, standard stuff that I know has a much higher velocity and I can get rid of in my area, right? So that's my deal. That's the trade we're doing. And it's 100% fair across the board. We're doing a fair trade. And I'm just like, all right, I'm happy. You're happy. He's like, I'm not happy. Because he didn't get to rip me off. Like, that was the middle era. Now in the current era, thankfully, we've bypassed that. We've moved from the point where, like, originally it was completely subjective. Then we had a combination of objective and subjective. And when I'm talking about objective here, I'll let you know that I mean you're using sites like Star City Games, Channel Fireball, face-to-face games for like Canadian prices, whatever it is that you're using there. It's something where we have like a de facto price setter where it's like, this is the market price. And I mean, Magic card prices are kind of like a fiat currency in that they're like, they say what we're worth, what we worth. We say what they're worth, and they are worth that simply because we say it, especially when pre-release prices are set. You will see some pre-release prices where cards will plummet and other cards will go up, and some of it's based on demand, but some of it's based on simply the fact that these cards were overpriced to begin with by these like made-up prices. So when price information is so readily available and everybody accepts a price like this, people walk in and go, okay, this card is worth X. Every single person is saying card X is worth 50. So now, if I give you this card for 30, we're not both agreeing that this card is worth 30. We're both agreeing that this card is worth 50, and I'm giving you a $20 discount on that. Now, do you see the difference in that? There's no movement in the actual valuation of the item. It's just the perception of what we're doing here. So it's very objective in terms of these prices are all set and very firm across the board. Most people are going to say that this card is worth X, and it makes trading a lot easier in that regard. There are frustrations that come along with this setup where now you have people who it's like, look, I have a 50-cent card, you have a 75-cent card, or the other way around. Usually, no, it doesn't go that way, because when it's mine, I say take the 75-cent card, I don't care. But there are people who will have a 75-cent card and you will have a 50-cent card. And because of that 25-cent differential objective stated market value, they will insist on getting that extra 25 cents worth of value. Now, I understand that that is 50% increase in terms of percentage-wise, but in terms of value, that's only 25 cents. And how much is your time worth? How much is your life worth? I'm not willing to squabble over that. Honestly, the only time I will grind people out on quarters is when it's for my own amusement and somebody's been so grindy in a deal with me trying to do so many grindy things that I decide I'm just going to start grinding them like crazy. And that's when I get right down into the minutia. But I would never do that. It's not worth it. So each like back in the day when there was the pure joy of everybody's just getting what they want, there's not nearly as much worry about worth, which was great. You shifted into the slight information age where now I know cards are worth X. I can get them. I can sell them online. So I have this incentive to rook you. So we moved into that middle, like dangerous kind of garbagey area, which was really bad for Magic trading for a lot of people, really good for obviously the people who are taking advantage of it. And now we live in a time where everybody can look up the prices of cards. And if you can't, somebody probably already knows the card right beside you or can look you up, so look it up for you. So we have access to information, which is great. I really like the absolute firmness on price. I don't like it. Makes trading more annoying in some ways. No matter what, though, across the board, when it comes to the whole trading concept, it's radically changed because now there are tons of people who operate on the concept of I'll just buy the cards I want. Trading is a hassle I don't want to deal with. Trading used to be a really big social aspect of Magic. It used to be walking around going, got traders, got traders, got traders. Hey, got traders, got traders, got traders, got traders, got traders, got traders. And now people will be like, hey, do you have cards? And they'll start looking through your binder. Would you sell that? Would you sell that? Will you sell this? You know what I mean? And I'm fine with that because that's how I make my bank. But it is totally wildly changed from subjective to objective, and that is my feeling. And obviously there is still a little bit of subjectiveness because people are willing to negotiate, and in the end, all the pricing to a degree is subjective by the people initially setting them, and then it's just kind of reaffirmed by market mentality. But either way, I thought it was very interesting the way that it's morphed over time. There are other subjects that I want to talk about that have morphed over time, so I will cover those as well. Thanks for coming by and listening to an old man who's been part of Magic, who's been here since the beginning, talk about how things used to be and how they are now. I'm not complaining, having a great time. We'll see you next time.
Hey everybody, this is the Blind Hypno Dragon. All hail Hypno Dragon. And I just want to say together, we are the sixth color of magic. God, I can't say, I hope I'm taping this right.